So it feels like a bit of a bringing in a quarterback controversy during the playoffs.
And so we're going to get, as we talk throughout the show and later, particularly about this African-American outreach. But my first question is it believable? Can you so significantly change your tone 11 weeks out? And will people find it convincing? I've learned lessons. I'm a better candidate. I've grown. And let's be honest, people do learn lessons. People do grow. None of us are perfect. Or will they say, oh, come on, BS, this is just a cynical ploy because what you were doing isn't working?
Yeah, I mean, he has called himself the candidate of change, and he certainly seeming to change before our very eyes. It is not quite a pivot. It feels like a U-turn. Can he actually stick to it? I think that's the big question. I think the part of the problem is a lot of the polls obviously say he's doing very poorly. A lot of this stuff is baked in. You talk about Kellyanne Conway, for instance. It seems like she's trying to add some compassion and make him out to be kind of the compassionate conservative. He had been the law and order candidate, kind of shades of Nixon. So now he's trying to pick up on this George W. Bush sort of approach. You know, I mean, the thing is, those two are kind of in conflict, right? So can he kind of maintain both of those identities at the same time, keep a hold of that base that loves him when he's riffing, loves him when he's playing the tough guy, but also try to get some of those college-educated white women in swing voters who want to see that compassionate conservative.
Didn't a lot of that base also love him when he says build a wall? And this is the guy who said he admired Operation Wetback during the Eisenhower administration. If he stands up in Colorado and says, let's find a humane way to keep the undocumented here, a lot of people will say, great, that's the only viable policy, but won't a lot of his people say, hello?
Which is why I'm skeptical that he'll actually go that far.
Right.
And also keep in mind the fact that we're talking about a pivot. If you look at his scripted comments this week, and if you look at the first ad that he released, it's the same kind of populism verging on nationalism that he's been pitching for the last few months. This is the scripted version of Trump. It doesn't have that much appeal for certainly non-white voters and certainly sort of upscale suburban voters who are often the swing voters now. You know, showing an ad of Hispanic folks on top of trains is not going to appeal to suburban Philadelphia college plus white voters. It's not going to appeal to the same kind of voters in McLean and Falls Church. I don't get why people think he's now doing this great pivot when the scripted version of Trump is still nationalism. Right. I mean, right?
And my question is, do the Clinton people see this as real? Because if you watch them on Twitter, you watch their statements in recent days, and I'm going to play a little Hillary Clinton here. This was at the beginning of the week. She was not responding to what we saw Friday and Saturday, which were the continuation of this change from Trump, new tone, and some would say new policy, or at least hints of possible new policy. But listen to Hillary Clinton here trying to tell people right off the top, don't believe what you're about to see.
I think it's fair to say that Donald Trump has shown us who he is. He can hire and fire anybody he wants from his campaign. They can make him read new words from a teleprompter. But he is still the same man who insults Gold Star families, demeans women, mocks people with disabilities, and thinks he knows more about ISIS than our generals. There is no new Donald Trump. This is it.
Is it in the sense that one of the things that has proven frustrating to Hillary Clinton is because people think they know her, because she's been around for so long, it's hard for her to change opinions about her. One of the things we did see from Donald Trump during the primaries is that people know him as a celebrity, they know him as a real estate guy, but he did actually change opinions about him because he's new on the political stage. Is there a fear in the Clinton campaign? They may think this is cynical, they may think this is bogus, but do they worry it might work?
Well, I think they worry that it would have an effect of consolidating Republicans, which is actually, when you look at the sort of polling in recent weeks, what it has shown is that Donald Trump has not done what virtually every other Republican nominee has done, which is consolidate his base, get up where she is among Democrats in the 80s, closer to the 90s among Republicans. There are a lot of Republicans, including many people in Washington, who say, we want to know if Donald Trump is going to be someone we can rely on to do what we want him to do. And that's what he demonstrated last week. I don't think the Clinton folks are worried about swing voters, because to Jonathan's point, the sort of suburban women, they have been bombarded with ads from the Clinton campaign locking in Donald Trump's persona for many, many months now. It's going to be very hard to undo that with one speech, but I think Republicans who are looking for a reason to trust Trump, this might be that reason that they're looking for.
And a lot of the polls show that some of these Republicans are really concerned about him being intolerant. 1 in 5 Republican men see him as intolerant, and 25% of Republican women. So when he goes and he's in front of those white audiences, he actually is appealing to those white audiences when he talks about African Americans. He isn't really, I don't think, at least, appealing to African Americans. He is trying to appeal to those audiences that he's in front of.
You mentioned the softer touch of Kellyanne Conway. She's never run a campaign. There are a lot of Republicans nervous about her running a campaign at this level, but she does have a history of messaging to try to get to more moderate, middle-of-the-road voters. And one of the things we saw was Donald Trump and Mike Pence go to Baton Rouge. They went to Baton Rouge, and, look, it's a photo op. Candidates do this, though. All candidates do this. I'm not criticizing Donald Trump at all for this. There's some question, is this the right time to go? Do you take away resources when you go? But he went there, and he showed some compassion here. They're helping to unload an aid truck. He, on a couple of occasions, said he thought President Obama should have broken his vacation and gone down there, or at least come back to the White House to monitor this. Is this just a smart reactive politics? Is it neither here nor there? Louisiana's going to be red in
Well, I think this is a rare moment where he actually saw a lane open that does make him look a bit more compassionate and went for that lane instead of maybe the more divisive one. Because there is a lane open because of the Obama administration up until several days ago not having even released a statement, although they've done resource updates. So I think that was not a bad move. The question is, can he find those lanes for the rest of the thing? And the other thing is, I think you're right when he's probably trying to go after these Republicans who are disaffected. Had he done this 6 months ago, I think that would have been much more likely.